Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're reading Acts chapter 20, verses 1 through 6. And my question for you is, do you know when to stop? Do you know when to stop pushing? Do you know when to stop going at it and to sit back? It takes great wisdom to know the exact time that you should stop, particularly in sensitive situations. And the Apostle Paul calls it quits here in Ephesus because of this great riot that happens, even though he is exonerated in the courts, even though the mob has dissipated and been sent away by the town clerk and the leaders, and it seems like this is a great victory for the Christians and for Paul here in Ephesus. He calls it quits, and he uses wisdom here to know that it is time to stop at this particular time. So let us read what happens. After the uproar ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging him, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia. Here's the example for us to follow, for us to have wisdom to know when it's time to stop. Paul has spent the most time in Ephesus than any other city. He has spent 3 years here. He has spent his life, a lot of tears for this church, and he'll mention that in a farewell address that he'll have with the Ephesian pastors later on in this chapter. And he says goodbye to them. He knows it's time to leave because he's figuring if he stays around, there's going to be some more trouble, and he wants to spare the church from that. And so he departs to Macedonia. So may you and I have wisdom to know when is it that we should stop. There is a time to stop. There is a time to hang it up, if you will, and may we all have the wisdom to know when that is, and even to re-engage when that time is appropriate. He said farewell and departed for Macedonia. I'm going to bring a map in. I've not done that. I've usually just encouraged you to go to the back of your Bibles and look at those maps. I think just spending time, particularly with Paul's missionary journeys. Also, we're talking Old Testament, the placement of some significant Israeli cities, I think, is important to know. Where the various tribes settled is helpful, and then also maybe with the Exodus leaving. When the Israelites leave Egypt and come into the Promised Land. I think it's helpful to just really spend some time with those maps. If you're not a nerd, you might not really like to do that, but it is helpful as you read because maps help you understand these places a lot better. So Paul at this point is in Ephesus, down here in Asia. He has come over. Israel is going to be down in the bottom right-hand corner on the other side of the water down there, down here on past roads. But he is here at Ephesus, and he's been here for 3 years. Now, if you go further to your right, if you go further east, that's going to be where Iconium and Derbe and Lystra, Antioch of Pisidia, those places that we heard about in his first missionary journey. And he visited as he did the start of the second, and even as he started the third. We're told that he went through those areas. So here he is now, third missionary journey, and he spent 3 years here at Ephesus. And now he has decided it is time to go. And so we're told that he goes up through Macedonia. Now we're just assuming that he's traveling the same path he did on his second missionary journey, so going up here and coming up into Macedonia. But if you remember in our text, he's not there very long. He said farewell. Oh, I've not read it yet. He said farewell and departed for Macedonia. Verse 2, when he had gone through those regions and had given them much encouragement, he came to Greece. So we're thinking he probably spent a little bit of time. Just the travel time would have taken a lot to go up here to Troas, go over here to Neapolis, Philippi, places that we've heard from the second missionary journey, Thessalonica, Berea, probably visiting those churches. I think it's a healthy assumption, a good assumption that Paul did that. We don't know for sure. Text doesn't tell us exactly, but he did go through Macedonia, and he did encourage the churches. And then it says that he came down to Greece, which would be kind of a different term for talking about the place of Achaia. Of course, there's Athens, and we think of Athens being the capital city of Greece. We are now in the Roman times where Rome owns all of this territory. So we're told that he comes down to Greece, and we're assuming he's going to be in Corinth. what is happening here is that while the focus for Luke is Ephesus, because we're going to get back to Ephesus soon in this chapter, and Paul's going to be giving him a big farewell address. What's happening between verses 1 and 2 of our reading today is that this is probably the time that Paul wrote 2 Corinthians to Corinth, and there's been a lot of drama that is developing in the Corinthian city, in the city of Corinth. And so a lot of heart-wrenching stuff that happens with the Apostle Paul. We'll look at that more in depth when we come to that, when we come to our study of 1st and 2nd Corinthians. But I think it's helpful to realize is that Luke doesn't make mention of any of that at all. In fact, there's a collection that's even being made for the church in Jerusalem. Paul makes reference to that in 2nd Corinthians. And so there's a lot of stuff going on here that Luke makes no mention of at all, because in Luke's mind, what he is wanting to kind of set up for is the imprisonment of Paul, even showing that Paul is walking in the footsteps of Jesus, even being captured and being arrested in a similar way, in an unjustly way, similar to what happened to Jesus. So he's now in Greece. By implication, we think that would be Corinth. He's spending 3 months in Corinth. Many smart people, many scholars believe that it would have been during this 3-month stay here in Corinth that he would have wrote his letter to the Romans. Probably a good guess that would be the time that he wrote that to them. He has a desire to go to Rome. His desire is to get back to Jerusalem. We know that from chapter 19. He wants to get to Jerusalem, and then he wants to get to Rome. While he was there in Corinth, a plot was made against him by the Jews as he was about to set sail for Syria. So Syria going to be the northern part, going to be where his home church of Antioch is, and then go down south to Jerusalem. That was his desire, so he wanted, while he's in Corinth, to get on a boat and go south to Israel. That would be the quickest. But because of whatever uproar was happening in Corinth with the Jews, it wasn't going to be smart for him to get on a boat, probably having a lot of Jews on the boat going to the Promised Land, going to Israel. And so rather than doing that, he chooses to kind of double back through Macedonia and come back this way through Miletus, and then goes by boat down to Jerusalem. He's really wanting to get there by the time of Pentecost. He's wanting to celebrate the festival of Pentecost there. So he decided to return through Macedonia rather than setting sail for Syria. Again, he is using wisdom. He is deciding to interact with his enemies by going by land rather than going by boat. He is being smart. He is not purposely putting himself in a terrible situation, even though it's going to seem like when he goes to Jerusalem, he is putting himself in a terrible situation. In fact, we're going to be told that he makes comment like, no matter where I go, everybody tells me that when I get to Jerusalem, they're going to tie me up, but I have to go there. I feel compelled to go there. And so there is just that dedication of the Apostle Paul to be about what he believes is the Lord's mission. So then we have some people that are mentioned here. Sopater the Berean, a representative of the Berean church, son of Pyrrhus, accompanied him, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and the Asians Tychicus and Trophimus. So we have representatives of all of these churches and all of these cities that the Apostle Paul has been a major influence in. And what we see here by implication is that he has raised up these mentees. He has raised up these disciples, and he is being a mentor. He's taking them along. He's training them. He's using them, and he is preparing the next generation for the next work. Remember, it seems like the Apostle Paul was maybe he was a novice at this at the beginning. Barnabas wanting to take Mark along with him, not wanting to. But then it seems like the Apostle Paul has really picked up the steam and really training a lot of people from these various churches. And of course, you see the famous protege of the Apostle Paul, Timothy, here being called, being along with Gaius, who is in the neighboring city, or the same city that Timothy was from, which is Derbe, or forgive me. Timothy's from Lystra, which is the border of Derbe. So both in that same area, and then probably from Ephesus being Tychicus and Trophimus, being people that the Apostle Paul is mentoring. These went on ahead, and were waiting for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, so that's Passover, so we know the clock is ticking. Paul is wanting to get there by Pentecost. Pentecost happens 50 days after unleavened bread, and so they're going to need to get there pretty soon. The clock is ticking, and Pentecost will be there. Apostle Paul is wanting to celebrate Pentecost in Jerusalem. And then by implication, we don't know this in the book of Acts, but Corinthians is telling us he is bringing a relief offering from the churches in Macedonia, in Achaia, in Greece. They are bringing money to help the poor in Jerusalem. And in 5 days we came to them at Troas, where we stayed for 7 days. So there is a ministry there at Troas, and then he spent a significant time in Greece as well. So I pray that has been a blessing to you. Sometimes we just got to know when to stop, and you're saying, Pastor Josh, why don't you know when to stop? I pray that has been a blessing to you, and I'll see you in the next video.